Christopher Chapple, it's so nice to be with you again. We want to draw you out a little bit on Jainism and ecology, which is one of your expert study fields and research areas, and you've been to India many, many times. But we'd love to hear you say, maybe for a few moments, what are some of the key cosmological insights that we get from Jainism?
Jainism comes more than 2,800 years ago from India, and in this tradition there's a cosmology that places life within places that we do not normally think there can be life. So that, for instance, in drops of rain, each drop of rain is said to hold a form of life. Each gust of wind is said to hold a form of life. Each kindled fire is said to contain life. What the Jain worldview mandates is that we, first of all, learn all the different places in which life exists and develop an ethic of care by which little harm is done. Because the other piece of Jain cosmology is that whenever an act of violence transpires, the perpetrator of that act attracts a darkening, a sticky, viscous, colorful substance that obscures the grandeur of the soul and clamps down and prevents any sense of freedom. So the Jain lifestyle is to progressively follow a course of action that will extirpate, will release these particles of karma, and thereby elevate the soul and advance one toward a state of blessedness and freedom.
So we have a deep understanding of the livingness of the universe, right, on
mm-hmm.
all levels, which is so extraordinary about Jainism. And this has implications, as you say, for salvation and a religious path. It also has implications for food.
From the very beginning, from the Acharanga Sutra, it was extremely important for people, first of all, to be able to inspect their food at all times, not eat after dark, because one would run the risk of inadvertently eating an insect. The other piece of it is that due to the presence of pulses and rices within India and an abundance of vegetables, it became possible very early on in Indian civilization to thrive on a vegetarian diet. So to be Jain or Jain in India is really synonymous with being vegetarian, and that lifestyle has been promulgated beyond the Jain community into the realm of what's expected of Buddhists in many parts of Asia, as well as, of course, Hindus.
Yes, and in particular, of course, a macrobiotic diet, for example, has come.
A macrobiotic diet would be quite possible. However, traditionally, Jains have said it's okay to have milk because milk is freely given by the cow. Contemporary Jains who have visited dairy operations, first in Vermont, and then gone back, putting on their wizened spectacles back in India, they've discovered there's been an industrialization of milk production. So a number of Jains, both in North America, Europe, as well as in India, are now espousing and really teaching that it's better to adopt a vegan diet, a macrobiotic diet, and to eliminate the use of dairy products because of the inherent violence with just the way cows are treated in today's world.
Yes. So food, of course, is just such a huge issue, isn't it, for so many people, and the factory farming of animals, and Jains have really held to the sense of this living quality of the universe and this vegetarian and vegan diet. In what other ways has Jainism contributed to our sense of human-earth relations and nature as something we need to protect and value?
Probably the most famous public Jain of the 20th century, Acharya Tulsi, wrote as a young man a multi-point manifesto about how best to practice nonviolence in the contemporary world. And one central premise, and this is back in the 1940s, was to avoid all forms of pollution. So anticipating even, many decades ago, what came to be a tremendous problem all over the world, and particularly in India, this association of technology and industrialization with harm to both the individual human body, but to entire ecosystems, this was sort of a clarion call that the Jain community needs to be attentive to this issue. And as a result, many Jains will say, of course, we are supportive of environmental causes.
Yes, and this tremendously powerful idea of nonviolence that later went into Hinduism and so on, and that Gandhi picked up on. Do you want to speak about that? How it was a force?
Nonviolence, also known as ahimsa, is the core ethical principle. It was first most fully articulated in the Acharanga Sutra, the oldest of the Jain texts, which comes from 300 BC. And it began as an inward practice where you just had to be very careful not to brush up against anything, not to eat anything that would cause harm to anybody. For the monks and nuns, they were not allowed even to cook their own food. They could only eat food that was given to them. But this practice, which for a starting point is utterly self-centered, became really a call for social action. And as Gandhi, in his really very, very close friendship with many Jains that he grew up with in Gujarat, and particularly Rajchambai, who was his Jain advisor and one of the two people that he really looked to repeatedly for spiritual advice, began to really merge that personal ethic with the social ethic, and this concern for social realities became disseminated in so many wonderful ways all over the world.
And was a force for transformation not only in India, but Martin Luther King, Tolstoy was deeply influenced by it, and so on. So
exactly, and Gandhi was influenced by Tolstoy, influenced by the Jains, and he really created this amalgam, and an amalgam that the Jains have really come to embrace. And they, today, not only in India, but throughout North America, give active support to animal shelters. Every October 2nd is declared Ahimsa Day, and there are events held all over the world in honor of this practice of nonviolence. And the Jains themselves, who are very much a minority community in India, have a natural affection for people that are in minority.
Yes, and so nonviolent civil disobedience, in fact, was something even Thoreau was in favor of, and now we have it even in the environmental movement with Bill McKibben's 350.org and so on, that people are saying we have to have nonviolent resistance to the destruction of the earth.
And so much of it is about consciousness raising. And so many wrongs have occurred in the world because people simply did not have the correct information. And the Jains have been, from the beginning, putting great emphasis on education. And much of what we know about really the world of journalism in India today is that it's free, it's open, that there are newspapers in every city that represent differing editorial views, and from really centuries, the publication business has been within the provenance of the Jain community. It's one of the many businesses in which the Jains have succeeded. And journalism, publishing, dissemination of diverse views, this is hard written into their philosophical commitment.
Yes. Maybe we can just conclude with, you edited the volume for the Harvard series on Jainism and ecology and Hinduism and ecology, but you've also done a wonderful book on nonviolence and animals, and maybe you can say something about that.
Right. As I became interested in how this ethic of ahimsa became disseminated through the world, moving from that early detail that we find in the Acharanga Sutra to its adoption, both in terms of the shift from animal sacrifice to vegetable sacrifice within most provinces of Hindu influence, as the Buddhists took up the practice of the release of animals as a way to gain merit. One finds that this has a compulsion through persuasion, and that persuasion by example is really what drove Gandhi. And he would say, I will not ask anyone to do what I have not already done and remain committed to do. And for me, that's really the take-home. that's really the lesson to learn from the Jains, is that we really have to walk our talk, and that in order for change to happen in the world, it must really start with each and every individual.
And you've been doing that through yoga and your own vegetarianism and tremendous scholarship with the Forum on Religion and Ecology, and we're so grateful.
Oh,
Chris.
thank you.
Thank you very much.